So it's been about a week now since the release of the War for Wakanda DLC for the Marvel's Avengers game, and we're even coming up on about a year now since the game itself released. I know I don't normally do a lot of reviews or update things like this, but seeing as Avengers is a game that I keep going back to with each new expansion, it seems like something that, so long as the game doesn't get canceled or discontinued because of its unfortunately really low numbers that have been coming out over the past several months, will probably be a mainstay of the channel for a while, just as we constantly jump back in to see the next hero or story event they throw at us. Unfortunately, one of the big things, though, that I think has always plagued Avengers is the fact that a lot of these updates that we care about seem to be so few, and while it is somewhat understandable as they're adding a whole new character with new mechanics as well as a new story and a lot goes into that, it is a little rough when most of this stuff was stuff that we initially seemed to think would be coming every 2 to 3 months with the way that they initially outlined their roadmap. Back when the game first came out, they were expecting and projecting Black Panther's DLC to be out in February of 21 and not August. But it is one of those things that, unfortunately, it is what it is. And we can only hope that now, as things are starting to go smoother and they're starting to release these more and more, they're finding little tidbits to kind of clip things faster and make them come out faster. So I really wanted to talk more about War for Wakanda though today, because now that we are at the year mark of the game, there's been a lot of talk about, is War for Wakanda going to be the make or break for the series? A lot of people were kind of saying that for the game to continue, that War for Wakanda had to be the DLC that would ultimately save Marvel's Avengers if it was to continue. In terms of the DLC being able to just save the game itself, I wouldn't say that that's what this one does. It's definitely a step in the right direction, which, if you watch anything that I've done on this channel gameplay-wise for it, or just about any person that seems to review this game, it's probably sounding like a broken record at this point. I feel just about every time a new character DLC comes out, all anyone ever seems to be able to say across the YouTube sphere or anywhere else is that the game is making steps to go into the right direction but isn't exactly there yet. But ultimately, there is a lot in War for Wakanda that I would say this isn't like it was in the past two Hawkeye DLCs, where it felt like we were taking one or two steps in the right direction. This was a huge bound going in the right way, in the right place. There's still just some things missing from it, and honestly, as much as I've enjoyed getting to go back in and playing the game, and as much as my huge fanboyness for Marvel and the Avengers probably helps save this for me in ways that it hasn't a lot of other people, there is no denying that this game is flawed and just honestly bad. There's a lot that this game did wrong, and while I would like to see them figure it out and succeed as many other live service games have done before it definitely has an uphill struggle and battle to go through. So I think we should start off really talking about what War for Wakanda does, the way that its story goes, its character, and all this stuff to kind of look at what they did right and the things that we're still hoping and expecting. Black Panther himself is honestly one of my favorite characters to come out for this game, and I think a lot of that comes from the fact that I think that they combine two of the more interesting characters that you can play as into one. I really like the martial arts characters in this game and the ones that have the cool fighting animations and things like that sort of over the others. Black Panther really is a mix between the two. He has Cap's more like brawler and overall ability to smash through things and strength, and he also has his double jump, which is one of the features of Cap that I always liked. I don't know why that's such an addicting thing to me in games, but it's really helpful for this type of game where you can close through and kind of bypass a lot of weird jumping puzzles and things like that by just jumping over any sort of parkour you'd normally would have to do to get through it. And Black Widow always had some of the cooler acrobatic and animations, I guess, more than actual fight mechanics and capabilities, but getting to see Panther use those while having Cap's damage output was always nice. My only complaint about Panther mechanically is his ranged weapon. I like the idea they went for with the way that his daggers can sort of weaken enemies so that you can hit them more. The only issue is that this game has a lot of times, and I've kind of complained about it a little bit in one of the gameplay videos I did, where you don't have a whole lot of health in this game. Depending on the enemy you're facing, 2 to 3 hits could be enough to kill you. So there's a lot of times where being able to use ranged weapons to pick off a few enemies just to get them to drop health orbs is super imperative to surviving. And because Panther's ranged weapons aren't really meant to kill things so much as weaken them so you can go in and kill them, it makes it a real pain in the ass for him. It definitely changes up the playstyle, and it wasn't anything that was too hindering. I eventually got used to it enough to be able to kind of work things around, but it is sort of unfortunate that it does take so much out of him to take down a lot of the ranged, or to take down things with his ranged ability. It's not anything that's too terrible. And I mean, again, it's not like he's the only character that's had issues. The story itself is actually really interesting, and I think a lot of people have been saying from the beginning that in terms of like the actual story going on, they've been pretty much nailing it and doing a pretty good job. I know some people are still sort of salty and sore about the main story having such a focus on Kamala. And while I think there's definitely that part of me that, like, one going into an Avengers game wanted really the focus to be on the main Avengers, I thought they did it in a way that was really nice to see. This DLC really does continue on with the continued story. It does really well with it. My only complaint with the story itself was more of a confusion thing, and that came following the Cosmic Cube event that came out in June. I had assumed that Monica was air quotes dead. I didn't think that her and Old Man Clint actually probably got offed. I mean, normally in comic book sources like this, when a character is dragged through a wormhole where you don't actually get to see them die, odds are they're not really dead. But it seemed like one of those things where we would at least be assuming her and Old Man Clint dead for a little while. And the fact that she was like already back and wasn't even addressing that was sort of something that threw me off. Seeing as this DLC was to come out in February, I don't know if they were doing some weird time thing where this was technically supposed to take place before that event. I also know Monica does have clones, so it's possible that a clone is running the company for her. It's just one of those things that the way things ended with that whole Cosmic Cube event, it seemed like those cutscenes implied that Monica was finally out of their way, at least for the time being. So to suddenly have her back in the picture, I'm like, I either misinterpreted that last cutscene or I missed something else in the game, because I was expecting her to be out of the way for at least a little while. Other than that, though, I did like what they did for this. It was cool to see Crossbones come in, and that was sort of a nice surprise. I do wish they would have kept it a surprise and not revealed him like the Saturday before the event went live when they were doing that live gameplay video. It's one of those things that it was still sort of surprising to see, but I feel like that shock factor could have been a little bit better if they didn't reveal that like 48 hours before it came. And Claw was honestly a nice villain to do for this. I know a lot of people wanted to see Panther really go up against Claw back in the movie. A big thing with the stories, though, for this, and I think a lot of people have been talking about this pretty much since the Kate Bishop DLC. And I have to agree that I really wish these DLCs would do more integration with the single-player story as well. I understand that being a Avengers game, they really want to run the four-person co-op stuff. And it is good that they do that. I know, unfortunately, none of my friends I could convince to buy the game. They enjoy the movies, but I do feel like one of the things that made the original Reassemble campaign great was the fact that you were able to go in and do all these sort of single-player moments where the game felt more singled in and focused on a singular character and allowed you to sort of do more in that moment. Those moments also seemed to give more tension, and though they were a bit more linear, they had a lot of like cool background and animation stuff going on that just helped make the entire event feel more immersive. A lot of these DLCs haven't really done that because they've just thrown you into these open like areas again where there's gear kind of hiding out in places. You can run back and forth from areas that are a part of the mission and not. And it just doesn't always feel like you've got so much going into it. They did do a little bit of things in this one that was different that I think helped to keep that immersion in there. The final mission of the game, when you're jumping through the like mound and stuff to get to Claw, was pretty interesting. And it was one of the few times where I really think that we got to see a mission that utilized a four-person like setup and atmosphere that followed that sort of linear path. And I think seeing that is at least something that gets me hopeful for the game in the future, is the fact that now we are sort of seeing them being able to say like, hey, people really liked that segment at the end of the game where you were Captain America running through that giant floating AIM fortress to get to MODOK, and being able to say, we can recreate that, but we don't need to force you in single player. You can do it with your friends. The big thing, though, that I think the single player stuff really should get kind of re-implemented for or looked at is the boss battles. I complained about this because I was a little agitated while doing the mission after dying to them. But the big thing that they kind of do here to sort of even out these fights, considering that it's 4 people usually going up against one boss, or in the case of this DLC, it was 4 heroes versus 2 bosses, is that the damage output on these bosses can get pretty ridiculous. Sometimes they make it a little bit nicer where it can take like 4 or 5 hits before your hero goes down, but there are some that like within a hit or two you can be out. One of the big things I think I complained about with Claw is that Claw has a sort of long-going combo that if you get caught in it, there's a good chance you're going to stay caught in it. In order to get out of it, when I got hit with it again in my second run of that, I basically had to mash my B button into oblivion, and Panther just so managed to be able to hop sideways out of it before the next hit that would have killed him and would have caused me to have redone that fight a second time. And I think like the crossbones aspect of that fight was really cool, having to drop him down so you could destroy his turrets and stuff. So I think like if they added more stuff like that, or did stuff like they sort of do in the Monica fight, where there's just a lot more going on and a lot more to the battle than just damaging them, it sort of evens it out. But I've seen it now with Taskmaster, with Maestro, with Claw, with Abomination, where it just feels like a lot of it is giving the boss insane damage output that just is sort of a backup, grab health, and then bash into them again and hope that they go down before you run out of ways to heal yourself in that fight. And I think it's truly unfortunate because it does make these boss battles kind of boring. And a lot of times, most of the tension you get and the tension that I feel is just the fact that as you get their health bar down lower, they start pulling out attacks that are just far more insane and harder to dodge, so it really becomes a push against the clock of, can I kill this thing before they use some weird-ass attack that's going to knock me out in one hit? This game... Boom. So the War for Wakanda DLC also did something really well that I think really cements it being a step in the right direction. And one of the big things I think was complained about and has really been noticed is that with each DLC, more and more is coming with it outside of just the story. When Kate Bishop came, there wasn't anything. I know at that time we were talking about getting that Omega level threat that we didn't get until just last month. When Hawkeye came with his new biome in the Future Wasteland, outside of a few like villain sectors that can pop up for Maestro, there was really only one mission that lets you explore the wasteland. And so it always sort of felt like you had maybe another 20 minutes outside of completing the DLC story, and then you were back to just running that new character through old missions you probably already played a million times to level up all the other heroes. War for Wakanda DLC kind of learns from that a little bit. By the time that I completed that DLC, there were about like 8 or 9 missions I think that had popped up in Wakanda. There are 3 like threat sectors that will stay there permanently that you can do whenever. And then they actually have a wide assortment of different drop zones that you can jump in and out of that will pop up from time to time. The drop zones, too, have done something that not a lot of the others really seem to do, where the drop zones being out in like more of an open area actually give you more to the map to explore. I know every now and then like you'll get a drop zone mission that will stick you in a hallway where maybe you can pick up a chest just like down an extra hall. But most of the drop zones in Wakanda, I noticed, had an extra like bounty enemy in there. Sometimes they would have a extra like chest or 2 sitting around, or some corrupted vibranium you could go destroy, which I think may just be a part of the event that's currently happening. But it's nice to see that that's there. Ultimately, though, I think there's still more they can get at it. And this was the point that I think really is, I'm like, it's really is a step in like this right direction that they need to go. They're adding more into the game. And this time, like Wakanda it came with more missions that you could do after the fact. They gave you more to kind of explore with Wakanda. It feels like Wakanda is a more complete location. The big thing, though, that I think this game needs, and I've been saying it for a while, is they've been talking about these patrol modes. It's just going to give you free reign of these different biomes that they're going to kind of release one after the other. And that, I think, is honestly essential to this game's survival at this point. And I think that would be the DLC that weirdly would be the thing with the most saving power for the game. Because while there's still that, like, want to get Black Panther up more and, like, level him up, get him up to level 50, and give him that max level, like, 150 power gear level, the issue really is that there's not enough content to really make you interested as you're doing it. Eventually you get to the point where you're slogging through again. I've already probably gone through the three Wakanda sectors like 2 to 3 times already just to get him up to like 130 now. And it is one of those things where it's not like you're necessarily going to get any sort of different feel with the patrols. The patrols will be a set map, but there's something about it that I think pushes it more. And a lot of it has come from my analogy too with like Destiny, where I remember playing through the first Destiny. A lot of times what I would do is go from the starting point when you would spawn down on one of those maps, run to the end of it, and then run back. And then whatever loot I had, I would go to upgrade. And that was normally how I spent that time. And I think Avengers sort of needs that. It's not one of those things that it's going to feel new or impressive every time, but having the open ability to drop into a map, run around in it for like an hour or two, come back with whatever loot you have and go from there, I think is just going to be more entertaining and just feel more rewarding than the idea of rerunning the same 3 missions over and over in the hopes of picking things up. I feel like I've been a little all over the place. I've been trying to reorganize thoughts as I go. Mostly hitting just about all the points I wanted to, though. As far as things go, the new loadout screen, I wanted to talk about that, I guess, a little bit. I didn't really care too much about it. I was fine with the loadout they had initially. I know a lot of people didn't like it. I think a part of it, though, is just my way of playing this game has really been whatever gear I cared about, I kept, and the rest I just destroyed. So I normally only had, like, 1 or 2 pieces of gear on me. I also was never at the point, though, where any of the gear I had was that impressive or made me want to keep it. I think a lot of that came from the fact that it doesn't change anything cosmetically. So a lot of times for me, it was just whatever made the hero the more powerful that they, or the most powerful that they could be, was what I kept. And I do think that's one of the issues this game has run into. There's been a lot of different little events that they've run over this past year now, but a lot of them, most of us haven't really noticed because the reward for it is gear. And if the gear maybe gave a more cosmetic change or gave a different feel to the game, then there'd probably be more jump on it. I know I might be more interested, but it's hard for me to go in and say, you know, I'm going to spend 2 weeks in this game putting hours into it to get a piece of gear that at the end of the day, I'll probably just end up deleting or putting into a chest in about a month from now when I get some piece of better gear for the character anyway. So we don't really know what the next step is for the game at this point now, outside of the fact that they have told us that Spider-Man will be coming out before the end of 2021. We still have about like 4 months now that hopefully we'll be seeing some sort of content come out for the game outside of just this Spider-Man DLC, especially because Spider-Man is limited to 1 console. So it makes it super hard to keep a lot of people interested, where if your numbers are already dwindling and only 1 console is going to get something before the end of this year, it's really going to hurt them. I'm not really expecting another character outside of Spider-Man before the end of this year. I think early 2022 is when we'll see the next, like, all versions getting a new character, just because Spider-Man will have some work to put in. So based off of that, that does look like we have almost 6 months at this point, probably, because I'm not expecting the next character for all systems until probably February of 2022, which is a long time to go for this game. This game has constantly been on its last legs. And so hopefully this Spider-Man DLC won't be the thing that puts that nail in the coffin. On the bright side, the end of the year does bring in a lot of holidays, so maybe they can find some way to incorporate the sort of holiday season into events to give some sort of reward to players as they go. And maybe some future MCU or comic-based skins might be able to pull some people's attention into the game as well. I think really at this point the game is going to have somewhat of an uphill battle. hopefully they'll be able to get a patrol or two out there so that people can explore the wasteland or Wakanda or a cityscape or something, have something more to do than just do these missions on repeat. Because being able to at least add that and give people more reason to play the game would at least extend things for a while. But really, the numbers always seem to bolster with a new character. And unfortunately, I'm not sure they necessarily realized at the time that they made the deal with Sony about Spider-Man that the game was going to be in the state that it was. But it is an unfortunate thing to think that there's going to be so much time now between two characters. And while I think some of the other YouTubers on this game are maybe a little bit harsher than they need to be, I don't think they're wrong. I think that the criticism is very much warranted, and that this game really needs to prove itself to a lot of people right now. And hopefully it's able to do that before it becomes washed out and not anything people will go back to.